Hi, my name is Drea Douglas. I am the learning coordinator here at the North Bend Public Library. If you don't know what a learning coordinator is, raise your hand. It's okay. They still let me do this job, and I'm still happy to do it. Mostly I do adult services, adult programming. And this summer, the theme is Imagine Your Story.
Ooh.
Leads to folk tales, folklore, fairy tales, fairy lore, any sort of tale, any sort of lore, including history, whether it's story or whether it's true. We don't care. This summer, it is about you and your story and the stories we like to listen to. And tonight, I'm having stories at 7 to have professional storytellers come in and do stories for adult audiences. Not that kids can't listen. Tonight, we have True Thomas the Storyteller, a man of many faces, and I would like, actually just one face, but many guises, and I would like to kind of put the elephant in the room and say, is it true?
What?
Your name up, you've got your name up as Santa Claus. Is it true you happen to know Santa Claus? Wait, what? Is that you?
No, I know him.
You know him?
I know him. He's a nice guy.
You have often performed in his place, I understand.
You know, the big man is busy, and sometimes I get to be a stunt double because, you know, you need expertise when dealing with the cookies.
We appreciate it.
Yep.
Well, thank you, sir, for coming here, taking time out of your busy schedule. Tonight we're talking long Irish stories, or your long Celtic stories, as he says. The forms are joke and saga.
Right.
And so we've got 2 stories tonight.
Mm-hmm.
What was the first story?
So 2 stories. The first one is Brian Boru and the Pooka, which is a traditional Irish story. And then the next one was going to be Hard John.
Yes.
Also called Stingy Jack.
Yes, or Jack of the... We'll find out in a minute.
Yep.
But not in a minute.
Okay.
Because we'll be doing the Pooka first, I believe. Absolutely.
And just so you know, storytelling is part. The storytelling, singing, poetry is all part of the soul of what it is to be Celtic. A traditional bard in the ancient days knew 200 forms of meter and rhyme and could entertain for 3 months, never repeating himself once. In Irish tradition, they might say, "Oh, make the road short for me." And what they mean is tell me a story, because their concept of time is a little different than what we think of today. And so, again, you know, it was no great thing to sit down and listen to stories for 3 days straight. They were the original binge watchers. You know, they would love, you know, these great epics and these beautiful nesting stories, one within another within another.
See, you have more viewers.
Wonderful.
Oh,
shall I go ahead and start the story?
Let's hear it.
All right, here we go. Storytelling time. Storytelling time. Come and listen to my stories. Come and listen to my rhymes. I will tell of the ancient days of our forefathers' time. Storytelling time. Storytelling time. Lords and ladies, jelly beans and crocodiles, come on in and have a seat for a while. Thank you for joining us on this beautiful day or night or whenever you watch this. I would like to share with you a few stories. My name is True Thomas the Storyteller, and this story is called Brian Boru and the Pooka. Now, back in ancient, not so ancient Ireland, they had a problem. This is a long time ago. They had a problem with fairy folk. Now, the main thing you need to understand about the fairy folk is you didn't want to mess with them. They were called the good folk for a reason. A fairy might lead a child into a puddle of water just to see the bubbles rise. They're not from around here. They don't know what cheese is. And one of the most dangerous kinds of fairies in the world was called a Pooka. Pookas were shape changers. They could be a lean greyhound. They could be a huge hellfire breathing black horse with glowing eyes. You could sometimes see them in their dog shape playing cards with all the other dogs. They could take any number of forms, and they had some nasty habits. And there was one particular Pooka who had, how shall I say, a dangerous proclivity. The one thing, this particular Pooka, he was possibly the king of the Pookas. This one thing that the Pooka liked to do was he liked to go out and about on a soft Irish night. And some Irishmen would be wandering home from the pub or from one place to another, you know, and doing the standard Irish mile, which is twice as long because you have to go from one side of the road to the other. And he was moving down the road, and he'd hear behind him, clop, 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 clop. When all of a sudden he would look and he wouldn't see anything, and he'd hear clop, 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 clop. And he wouldn't see anything, and he'd start walking forward again. Then he'd hear clop, 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 clop. He'd turn around, and then in front of him, a huge hellfire-breathing horse with eyes aflame, and it would grab him and throw him up in the air, and he would land stuck on its back, screaming. And then the Pooka would take off, and it would go 3 times around Ireland. 3 times around Ireland, going so fast that the dirt flew up like swallows in flight. And as it went around Ireland, it was going so fast that parts of the poor fellow might be fallen off. You know, a leg in Limerick and a kidney in Killarney. And they would never see the poor soul again. And this Pooka seemed to like this particular little nasty occupation. Well, one night, Brian Boru, the last emperor of Ireland, was lying in bed, and he's trying to snooze off, when his darling wife said, "Brian, are you asleep?" And of course he went. She said, "Brian, I can tell you you're not really asleep." He says, "Oh, my love, my kushla. Oh, what can I do for you?" She says, "Do you know our son?" "Oh, aye. A great lad, a great lad. He'll be the lion. He's the next lion of Ireland. He'll be a great king someday." "Well, darling, he's not feeling at all well." Children don't get sick all the time. Just give him a pint of Guinness. He'll be fine by morning. And Gormlith, who, by the way, was part Viking and was as easy to manage as an armful of cats and had a tongue that could skin an anvil, right? She turned to him and very softly said, "Brian?" "Yes." "Are you a doctor?" "No." "Then how can you be lying there in bed with the life leaving our child? How dare you? What kind of a man do you call yourself with your child dying in the other room?" He says, "What do you want me to do?" She said, "Go and fetch a doctor." Right, fetch a doctor. He thought about it. Fight Gormlith, boatload of Vikings. Gormlith, boatload of Vikings. He'd rather fight a boatload of Vikings. And so he got up and he started wandering around his castle. Now, there were people in his castle who called themselves servants. He wasn't quite certain what they actually did. They had some sort of function, but he really was never quite certain about this. And he always knew where to find them. They were always in his kitchen eating his food. And so he trotted on down the stairs, and who should he see sitting at the table, tucking away at a nice light Irish meal of colcannon, you know, which is butter, bacon, cabbage, and potatoes all mixed together. So good. And a nice Irish breakfast. And oh, it's a heart attack on a plate it is. And he saw Seamus in there just tucking away, and he walks up behind him and puts his hands on his shoulder and says, "Hello, Seamus." "Your Majesty, you're never up at this hour." "I know. Do you know my son?" "Yes. Ah, fine lad, fine lad. He'll the stallion of Ireland. Oh, he'll be a great king someday." "I know. And he's not feeling at all well." "Your Majesty, children, they get sick all the time. Just give him a few shots of ushkiba. He'll be fine by morning." And by the way, ushkiba literally means the water of life. Gives you the importance of it in Irish culture. At which point, Brian Boru, who, because he was a king, never threw away a good line, said, "Seamus?" "Yes, Your Majesty." "Are you a doctor?" Oh, no, Your Majesty. And then how can you be sitting there filling your gob with all the tasty food and victuals in my house when the life is leaving my child? What kind of a man are you? Do you not owe fealty to me? He said, of course, Your Majesty. But what can I do? I can't go outside. There's a Pooka outside. Brian Boru looked at him and said, oh, Pooka, you go out there and you find a doctor for my son right now. Yes, Your Majesty. And so he took some of that food and he folded it up in the napkin and he put it inside his little waistcoat and filled his pockets because it might be a bit of a trip. And he got outside and off he went. Now I have to warn you, there are some bits, no actual animals are harmed in the telling of this story. He went outside and he was, everybody say it with me, he was never seen again. Okay, slight caveat to that. So, of course, the young child gets better all by himself, as children do. And Brian Boru, hadn't seen Seamus for a while. Well, there became a knock at the door. Brian Boru kind of looked around for the servants to go and answer the door, and of course they never did. So he, walked over to the door and opened it up, and there were a couple of gentlemen standing outside with a wheelbarrow. And hang on a second. All right. And so there are a couple of gentlemen outside with a wheelbarrow. And one of the men takes off his hat and says, excuse me, we're looking for His Majesty, His Royal Excellency, Brian Boru, he of the Cattle Tribute. Brian Boru pointed to the crowd. That would be me. Oh, Your Majesty, I hate to bother you, but we found something we thought might belong to you. Brian Boru said, what's that? The man walked over and he took a cloth off the wheelbarrow and Brian Boru went, ew. It was the torso of poor Seamus and a few other things. And Brian Boru looked and he said, why would you think that was mine? He says, well, yeah, we were checking the pockets for identification, And what did we find? But inside his waistcoat, a stick of Irish butter. And it has the royal seal on it. So we knew he had to be one of yours. And as you know, Irish butter is good stuff. They're still pulling it out of the box to this very day, although I wouldn't recommend it on toast. So anyway, Brian Boru says, well, I guess he's mine. And the two men kind of looked around and said, well, we kind of thought we'd bring his last earthly remains to you. You could do, And they kind of rubbed their fingers together and he went, oh, right. So he pulled out some coins. But as he was pulling out the coins, he looked down. And what did he see? But on the buttons of the waistcoat, there were long black hairs. Now, Seamus only had a little fringe of white hair and otherwise was as bald as an egg. And he looked down and he saw the long black hairs. He went, now I know what happened. These are the hairs of everybody say it with me.
Pooka.
Okay.
And he wrapped them up and he paid the gentleman a couple of coins. He said, could you go plant that over there, maybe put a tree on it? And they took care of poor Seamus. Well, see, one of the problems of being a king is once you become a king, you get all sorts of knightly warriors and types all around you. And the minute that any monster, dragon, cyclops, what have you, shows up, your great warriors stand up and off they go to deal with it. And you're stuck there, not being able to do much of anything except paperwork. And Brian Boru hated paperwork. And so he said to himself, you know what? I think somebody needs to deal with this Pooka problem. And since I know about it, I'm going to deal with it. And so he went off and he studied. He went to the places where the people keep all the books, the wise women with the colored hair. And he said to them, how do I deal with the fairy folk? He went to the ladies who, have the children who travel to foreign places with all the knowledge and everything and bring it back and share it. Those women who know the things that people don't discuss over hedges. And so he talked to them and pretty soon, and he talked to the old clerics and, he talked to everybody and he came up with a plan. He came up with this plan. And then he called old Fergus over. Now, old Fergus was been at his side. He was a Dalcassian, one of the Kennedys. He had been alongside him during the Viking Wars, and which, of course, had been going on for 200 years. And he said, Fergus, yes, Your Majesty, I need you to find me an old widow woman in need of relief. And Fergus kind of looked over at Gormleth and then looked, who was a large, lavish woman with fists like turnips. And he looked over at her and looked back at the king. I'm sorry, Your Majesty, what did you say? He says, I need you to find me an old widow woman in need of relief. Right. Not that kind of relief, you daft one. No, I need you to, you Gomeril. Oh, I want you to go and I want you to find an old widow woman who, maybe lost her husband in the Viking Wars or something, and tell her I'm going to come and bring her some money or some food or something. Ah, that I could do. Oh, do I have a woman for you, Your Majesty? She's got a face like an axe. She's got a nose coming down like this, a chin coming up like this, a wart on the side of her nose, the size of your fist with 3 black hairs sticking out of it, one eye hanging down like this, and another eye going so far back that a heron couldn't pluck it out. Oh my God, she's got a hump on one side of her back and a hump on top of that, and things crawling around her, scraggly little beard, a little bit of green stuff hanging down on one side. Right. If there was ever a woman terribly unburdened by beauty, that would be her. Yes, go and tell her. And tell her I'll be there in a day or so. Righto. And off he went. That night, Brian Boru got ready. He made himself a rowan wood riding crop. He put on cold iron spurs, because we know how much the fairies love cold iron. And he did a few other little preparations as well. And that night, he stepped out the door and started walking down the roads of Ireland. And as he walked down those roads of Ireland, it was, how we say, a wet and wishly night. It was, as the Irish say, a soft evening. Oh, don't you know, we have the cleanest country in the world. We wash it every day. And with that, he was walking up and down the roads. And as he was walking up and down the roads, he started to hear behind him, pad, 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 pad. Turned and looked, didn't see anything. He kept walking, he heard pad, 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 pad. And he saw a black shape, a black greyhound moving in amongst the shadows. He picked up a stone and put a charm on it. I play dominoes, you play dominoes, we all play dominoes. And he threw the stone. Whatever it was ran off. He started walking up and down the road again. And he hears behind him, clop, 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 clop. He turns and looks, nothing there. The roads are getting a little steeper and higher. He keeps walking, clop, 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 clop. He turns and looks, there's nothing there. He keeps walking, and behind him, as the wind is coming up, he hears clop, 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 clop. It sounds very close, clop, 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 clop. He turns and he looks, and he turns back, and there in front of him is a huge hellfire-breathing black stallion, flames shooting from its mouth, eyes of flame, sparks coming from it, hooves right in front of him, 18, 20 hands high. It's huge. And Brian Boru looks up at it and says, "Good evening." Now, I have to tell you, and all the time that the Pooka had been running around and chasing the little monkey boys and throwing them on its back and tearing them to shreds, this had never happened. And the Pooka was somewhat startled. This was usually a part where the humans go, "Ah!" go running off. But that was not happening this time. And so it didn't know what else to do but started walking beside Brian Boru, the last emperor of Ireland, as he was walking up and down the hills. Brian Boru nods to it cordially, says, "Good evening." The Pooka leaned a long neck and opened its mouth to show jagged teeth and said, "Good evening." Now, you and I might be feeling a little bit, a bit of emotion if a long, giant, fire-breathing horse just leaned over to us and said, "Good evening." But Brian Boru took it in stride. He was a hero after all. And so he kept walking down the road, and the Pooka just kept walking with him. After a while, he kind of looked over and, oh, his back. Oh, my back. It hasn't been the same. I took a blade, or no, it was an axe. These hills, I wish I had a decent ride, but somebody took my last good white horse, and I don't know why. The Pooka smiled an evil grin, because it knew exactly what happened to that horse. And it turned and it said, well, if you like, I can give you a ride. And Brian Brew turned and looked at it and he said, what, you? Yes. You're way too small. I'll bend you like a blade of grass. I'm a huge Irish man. I'm a giant of men. You tiny thing. You're barely a colt. I'll break your back. And the Pooka looked at him with eyes of flame, quite amazed, and said, I might be older than you might suppose. Brian said, all right, but I wouldn't want to hurt you, but tell you what, I'll make you a deal. You let me count your teeth, and if you are old enough, I will ride you. And the Pooka said, agreed. And it leaned its long head over and opened up its mouth like a crocodile, huge, and it was full of sharp and jagged teeth. And the inside flames looked like the inside of a lime kiln, glowing white, yellow hot. And Brian leaned over and went, and he started to count, and he said, 1, 2, 3, 4. And he lashed something over the mouth and the muzzle of the horse, and he pulled down, and the Pooka went, ah! And went insane and started to leap around. And pulled down on the bridle. Now, no mortal bridle could hold that horse. Anybody want to guess what that bridle was made out of?
Iron.
No. Good guess, though. The 3 black hairs.
Oh,
He had made the bridle of its 3 black hairs, and the one magic that Pooka could not break was its own. And so he pulled out that rowan wood riding crop, and I said, no actual animals are hurt in the telling of this story. And he started to lash it and to smack it around, and the Pooka started to dance and try to get at it. But Brian, he was a strong man, and he pulled down on that bridle, and he said, oh, you want to give me a ride? You can give me a ride. Let's see what you can do, laddie. And with that, he leapt onto the back of the Pooka. He pulled back on the reins, and he dug in with those cold iron spurs. And the Pooka screamed, and it took off. Now, I need a little bit of help with this. It went 3 times around Ireland, just as fast as flight, as fast as a thought of a woman between 2 lovers, so fast that the swallows flew up, the dirt flew like swallows in flight behind it. 3 times around Ireland, it went. Can you make the sound with me? Here we go again. Brian Brew, 3 times around Ireland they went, and he saw a mountain go by that he recognized. He said, oh, I know that place. Up and down the mountain they went. Up and down the mountain they went. And as they went, pieces of stone and flint were flying off it until finally it got to the top of the mountain. And Brian Brew said, all right, you'll be telling me your true name. And the Pooka went, never! And with that, it leapt off the top of the mountain. Everybody take a deep breath. Here we go. Okay. Hit the water below. And you might think it was sinking 1,000 feet down. The water was a different domain. It was the realm of Manan Makalir, the beautiful white foaming destroyers that crash against the shore. Those are the beautiful white horses, the white manes flowing of the sea god Manan Makalir. That Pooka hit the top of that water and flew across the top of the waves. A dark, dark shadow amongst the white foaming waves. Across the top of the water it went until finally it got onto shore, and Brian Brew said, well, let's go the other way. And 3 times round Ireland they went. Everybody, here we go. Brian Brew looks and he sees that mountain go by again. He goes, oh, I know this one. Up the mountain they went. Pieces of stone and flint flying off it. It gets to the top. And finally, Brian Bruce says, "Are you ready to take a break?" And the Pooka said, "Free me and I'll give you what you want." He says, "Right. You'll give me your true name." "No." "Oh, really? You know, I know something about you, Unseelie." "What?" "That you can't stand the touch of daylight." "Is that the sun coming up? I think I could see your house from here." And the Pooka said, "Free me! Free me, and I'll tell you my name." He climbed off it and he pulled the bridle up close and stared it right in its flaming eyes. And he said, "Right, Pooka, you'll tell me your true name." And with that, the Pooka said, "I'll tell you my true name, and long may it burn in your ears." And Brian went, "You know, I studied Welsh for just this occasion." That was, let's see, H means backspace delete, and then two L's, right? And he wrote it all out, and he rolled it into a piece of paper, and he said, "You see this, Pooka?" "Yes, free me." He says, "This is your true name. That means we have power over you. So I have a few conditions." The Pooka said, "What? Quickly." He says, "From now on, no more killing of Irishmen. Help yourself to all of the Sassanah, to all the Vikings you like, but no more killing of Irishmen. You could pick them up because we got a problem in our country with people with broken elbows. But if you pick up anybody and take them for that drunken ride, you bring them alive right back to where you found them." "Agreed, free me." He says, "Secondly, right, from this day forward, if I hear of any problems with you or the rest of the Pookas, you know, like any of my ancestors, what is it, Helen Suthill's children, those Irish children. If any of those children hear of any problems with Pookas, they'll be inviting you to a nice sunny beach for a picnic. I'll make certain they get the name." The Pooka said, "Free me!" He said, "Righto." He climbed off and he pulled the bridle off, and the Pooka leapt off the side of the mountain, the dark side of the mountain, away from the gathering light, into the shadows and the crevices and the boulders and the trees covered with moss, into the dark, deep forest where sunlight rarely goes. Now, I have to tell you, things did not go so well for Brian Bruce's family as the years went on, because welcome to a Celtic story. Celtic stories are always beautiful and glorious and end badly. But in this one, we actually have a glimmer of hope. Because I have to tell you, when you go to Ireland and you see that particular mountain, if you talk to the tour guides, they'll say, "Oh, don't you know, that's where the pilgrims on their knees go up and they do their prayers at the top of the mountain there. And that's why it has that birthday cake kind of design to it. That's people going up on their knees." But if you go into the pub and you ask the drunks, I mean the people inside the pub, ask them about that mountain, they'll say, "Ah, that's where Brian Boru tamed the king of the Pookas."
Yeah.
Have either of you heard that story before?
I haven't.
I have not heard that. I've actually not heard that many of Brian Boru's stories.
Yeah, there aren't that many, honestly. All right, well,
He's fun
actually,
to tuck.
there's a
He's
lot
fun to
more
tuck into a
stories.
story.
Right, there's a lot more stories about the Fianna and the Knights of the Red Branch and that sort of thing. So it's nice to have Brian Boru get a chance to get out and, spread his stuff once in a while. But actually, the part where I talk about the Dalcassians, those actually were the Kennedys, the Kennedy clan. And another fairy creature associated with that clan is they have their very own Banshee. Now, Banshee just means fairy woman, but keening and wailing was part of the death tradition. And so it was also called the washer at the ford. You would be walking through the forest and you would see some woman washing the blood out of a shirt, and it would be your shirt. And what she's saying is, "Yeah, get your affairs in order." But supposedly, Avel, the fairy queen of Munster, was the Banshee of the Dalcassian clan. and so she was heard to cry before any of the deaths of the powerful Kennedy family.
Wow.
Woo! All right. All right. So we're going to tell another story. Did you get a chance to read that?
Yeah,
All
I
right.
did.
What? Read what?
Hooray! Bo just sent a note saying, hooray! Hello, Bo. All right, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this tam off and we're going to switch gears just a little bit.
Oh, there's the chat.
Yeah, the old joke is you heard the one about a Scotsman who dropped his tam in a field full of cow patties. He tried 3 before he found one that fit. So we'll take that off here. Oh man, those are warm. All right.
And
So,
again, no actual relation to Santa is seen here outside.
No.
Game. Santa Claus is actually.
Jingle bells. Oh, sorry.
He's not the same Santa Claus. This Santa Claus is actually the Welsh spelling of True Thomas the Storyteller. People don't know that. So if anyone's watching at home and their kids are going, hey, wait, don't worry.
Let's just say that I get around. So, would you like to hear the next story?
I believe we would. It's a Jack story. It's a Jack tale.
It is a Jack story.
In the storytelling world.
There are some stories that everybody tells if you do traditional folk tales. Probably the one that all the I see notes. The one that everyone tells is Dame Ragnall, the Loathly Lady. And another one that gets told is this one, which is of Irish origin or Scottish origin, depending on who you talk to. But it has a very important part in one of our American traditions. See, a lot of people don't realize is that we celebrate 2 big Celtic holidays. First, of course, St. Patrick's Day, but the other one is Halloween. Halloween is the Celtic New Year's. It's the day when the wall between the worlds is at its thinnest. And the things that go bump in the night often do. Now, I've heard it said that, the ancient Celts were headhunters, and so they would prepare their heads so if they got taken in combat, they would look very nice. And then they would preserve that head with cedar oil and put it outside on Halloween so the things that go bump in the night would look and go, ooh, badass warrior, and just keep moving along. Well, when the Irish, immigrate to the U.S. and the U.K. and head up into the mountains of Appalachia, head up into the mountains of Appalachia, where, oh, look, we're brewing whiskey or poitín, because, we'd never do that illegally and off the books. And, they're up there in the mountains of Appalachia, and the one thing that the Celts used to do after, the woman in the house, ixnayed the whole collecting of headays, Seamus, get that head out of the house. Why? I took it in combat. He was limping when you took it. The mice have been at it. So what am I going to do for Halloween? Well, carve a turnip. And so that's what they used to do for Halloween is they would carve turnips. And put little candles inside of them. And if you have ever seen it, actually looks pretty cool, is a turnip, because it looks a little bit like a glowing skull, and they would put those outside. Well, of course, this tradition goes on, and it ends up back in the United States, and so you've got Tommy, or Ryan, sitting down there, and one of his Native American friends sits down next to him and says, so what are you doing? I'm carving a turnip, which is symbolically actually a head, for Halloween Samhain. This is called a pumpkin. Oh, look at the size of that laddie. Look at the size of that fella. And so, we started putting pumpkins outside, which, we call them Jack-o'-the-lanterns. Well, we can fast forward to today, and what do is we see children going by and they're trick-or-treating and everything, and you see them carrying plastic pumpkins, which as a storyteller, I see this, and as a Celt, I see that plastic pumpkin and go, look at the size of that laddie, because what they're actually carrying is the severed heads of their enemies taken in ritual combat. It does the Celtic heart proud. Here you go, extra candy for you. Oh, but I digress. There was a fella, his name was John. His name was John, and he was considered, how do I put it? A real not nice fella. He was said that, you know, if you pulled a coin out of his pocket, the face on the side of it would squint for the light. You'd swear he got into the wrong trousers every morning because, you know, his hand never seemed to go toward the pocket ever. They called him Stingy John or Stingy Jack. And you know, nobody really wanted to have anything to do with him because he was a mean, terse fella. Not only that, but, you know, the worst part was he was a very talented blacksmith. And everybody was like, you know, they hated to deal with him because he could make anything. And he was a good craftsman, but you had to count your fingers afterwards when you dealt with him. He was not a nice fella. Well, oh, pardon me here. I have to move something. There we go. Stingy John, the word about him and how mean and miserly he was got all the way up to heaven. All the way up to heaven. And the angels were sitting around talking about this evil person and that evil person, and, you know, we won't go into specifics. And then one of them mentioned Stingy John. And Peter, Angel Gabriel said, well, okay, yes, we've got some really evil humans down there, but, you know, nobody's as bad as all that. Everyone has a chance for redemption. The other angels looked around and said, you have not met this person. He says, really? I will bet you that I can get him to show some human kindness. All the other angels said, uh-huh, sure. I said, really? You, me? All right, somebody else man the gate. Patrick, come on over here and man the gate. At which point, the angel Gabriel went, and he flew down to earth. And he flew down to earth, and he turned himself into a poor little beggar. And he made his way over to the smithy. And there was Hard John working away. Ding, ding, ding. And Gabriel the beggar looked in and said, excuse me, sir. What do you want? I was just wondering if I could just get something to drink from you. I'm terribly parched, like the desert. Do I look like an inn to you? I do not have time for people like you. I am not a pub. I am not a place of whiskey finding women. You move on and get away from my place. I should just a tiny drop of just any kind of liquid that you would have to have. Now I have to tell you, Stingy Jack knew that people had been talking about him, and it kind of was bad for business. And the one thing he could not tolerate was losing business. Right, fine. You can have some of that quenching water right over there. Now, for those of you who don't know what quenching water is, it's not quenching. Well, technically it is. It's the thing that after they take the smoking red hot tools and everything that they've been working on, they stick it in the water. And that water is nasty. It is 300% muckety muck. And the beggar Gabriel walked over and said, "You're too kind." And he started to hobble away a bit. All right, I don't want to see you again here. Sir, if I could just ask one more thing. What? Do you have just a crust of bread or just something to eat? I'm so hungry. Do I look like some sort of kitchen, some fine dancing restaurant where you go and have people bring food to you and people gather in groups? Remember that? And all those people, having a good time and being served big plates of steaming food? No, you don't. You're right. Get out of my shop. I just wanted to crush to help an old man. John remembered, could hurt business. He went, fine. There's some old crusts over there you can have. Indeed, it had been a piece of an old sandwich long forgotten maybe years ago that was so bad and so desiccated even the rats and the mice wouldn't eat it. And the angel Gabriel, dressed as a beggar, went over and went, you're really too kind. He started to leave again. John was banging away on what he was working on. He said, just one more thing. What? Could you just say, my old bones are aching. I've got the ache, something bad. Would it be okay if I just curled up someplace warm for a little bit and just got out of the cold for a second? Fine. You can sit here next to my bellows and my forge. You'll be nice and warm. The old man made over and he curled up, and John kept working away on the metal, banging away right next to the man's head, sparks flying, cinders coming down, smoke blasting him in the face. And after a little while, the little man got up and started to make his way out. He said, God bless all here. Yeah, whatever. Now he started to leave. And just then, the sun came up behind him, because angels know how to make a presentation. And he went, whoa, and he turned back into his glorious angelic self, beautiful white wings. And he looked, now he was a tall, 8-foot tall angel, and he looked down at John and he said, John. Just for a second, Hard John looked up and said, who are you? I was that little beggar that you showed your kindness to. He says, no, don't get me wrong. Everybody said you had no kindness in you. And so I am going to give you 3 wishes. You're going to give me 3 wishes for some nasty water, a crust of bread, and sparks. Indeed, I am, because you've proven my point. All right. What would you like, John? Well, you see that rocking chair over there? Yes. I have people come in and they sit down in that rocking chair and they rock it and they break it all the time. I want it so as anybody sits in that rocking chair, it rocks them half to death, and they can't get out unless I say they can get out. And Angel Gabriel looked at him and said, John, I think you're missing the point here. You were I'm trying to get you to redeem yourself. He said, you said they were my wishes, right? Well, yes. Well, that's one of my wishes. All right. And then John, who was warming up to the task, he looked over there and he said, you see these tools here? Yes. Everybody wants to borrow my tools all the time. They come in here. Can we borrow a hammer? Our wagon full of children are suffering. We just need to put this wheel on. Yada, 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 yada. I want you to do something that makes it so that if they're using one of my tools, they can't stop using one of my tools. Like that hammer over there. And the angel Gabriel looked at him and said, John, I'm begging you to reconsider. You have a soul. You eventually will leave this mortal coil. He says, yeah, right. I have one last wish, right? And angel Gabriel looked at him and winced and he said, yes. He said, right. Outside my smithy, I've got an apple tree. And that apple tree has some of the best apples in all the world. And I have to tell you, those kids are up in my apple tree all the time taking the apples before I ever get there. People just come in and snatch my apples. I never get a chance to eat them. I want it so if they get up in that apple tree, I can say, grab, apple tree, grab, and it'll beat the tar out of them. and they can't get out until I say that they can get out. And the angel Gabriel says, are you sure you want to waste your last wish in that mean-spirited way? Hard John said, well, I gave you water and bread and a warm place to sit. I would like that last wish. Angel Gabriel looked at him and said, right. Indeed, you shall have them. But I'm just telling you, how you behave affects how you're treated when you travel. Keep that in mind, John. And with that, the angel walked out and whoa, went back up to heaven. Now, Hard John went back to business, ging, 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 and doing his normal thing as he normally did. And the years went on, and he got meaner and more vicious and more grumpy. And then one day he was heading out to the forge and starting to get some work done, ging, 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 when all of a sudden his ticket was punched. He died. As mean and cantankerous as ever. He just fell over like a budgie. Well, I have to tell you, he got up from his mortal body and looked at his ghost self and went, oh, that's not good. And just then, a little demon popped up. Now that little demon, it ran around the room, snapping its tail, flapping its little bat wings, and went, oh, Hard John, we've been waiting for you. Oh, yes, 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 yes. We have such a lovely fan club waiting for you. You are a real hero. I can't bring you down. I can't wait to bring you down below. Come along. Time to bring you down to 8E double hockey sticks. and John looked and he said, great. You demon fellas, devils, you're all about contracts, right? Yes. He says, well, I made a deal that I was going to finish these horseshoes, and I would hate to break my contract. As one mean-spirited person to another, you wouldn't want me to break a contract, would you? All right, finish quickly. He says, all right, right. Just have a seat over there. And the little demon climbed into the rocking chair and went, started rocking back and forth. And John went, rocking chair, rock. And with that, the rocking chair started to rock. And the little demon was screaming. At which point the demon said, John, free me, and I will give you what you want. And John said, I want another year of my life. Okay. And I want you to never bother me again. Okay. Rocking chair let him go. Demon flew across the room, hit the wall, slid down, got up and said, I've known some mean people in my life. I know the scariest demons in all of hell, and you, sir, you're a piece of work. And with that, the demon went, goodbye, John. Oh, and it ran over, grabbed him, and stuffed him back in the body and went and disappeared. John got back up. He got back to work. A year went by, and he forgot all about it. Sure enough, he was overloading some coal into the furnace or into the fire in his smithy when all of a sudden, boom, down he went again. His ghost self came up and he looked down and he said, oh, not again. And just then, boom, in flames came the biggest, scariest demon he had ever seen. He had only seen one other, so anyhow, this huge demon came in with great big tusks and eyes of flame, and it was so big it came into the room, and 2 minutes later its knuckles came dragging in. It was huge, and it was hairy, and it walked over and said, you are going to the bad place. And John looked and he said, right, I guess I'll, oh, dang it. He looked and he said, I have this one last nail to drive. It'd be a shame not to smash it. The demon perked up and said, smash? He said, well, I'm a strong smith, but if somebody were truly strong, they could just pick up that hammer over there and with one blow set it home. The demon said, I like to smash things. And John smiled. He says, I bet you do. How about you pick up that hammer and give it a whack, and then we'll go. Okay. He reached over and picked up that hammer. It looked minuscule in its hands and went, ding! And John smiled. He said, hammer, hammer. At which point the hammer went, ding, 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 ding. And the demon was bouncing around, and he could not stop. The hammer was driving. His bones were starting to buckle, and he went, let me go. He says, you got to give me another year of life and leave me alone. Okay. At which point John said, hammer, let him go. And John, he let go. The demon peeled off that hammer and went vibrating across the room. And he finally stopped bouncing, and he looked at John, and a little tear was in his eye. And the demon went, you're a bad man. And the demon disappeared. Another year went by. John got more and more famous for being this old cantankerous relic that seemed to live forever. And sure enough, he was in the kitchen of his house when all of a sudden, a year later, he was down on the ground, and he looked down at his body and went, and just then there was a smell of brimstone, and there in an elegant suit, with a little briefcase, little hat, little horns, little goatee, little glasses, was the devil. And his nail and his hooves had just been buffed. He looked good. He looked elegant. And the devil said, well, John, I have to tell you, we are all impressed by how you trick those other demons, but I assure you, you will not out-trick the king of tricks. It's time for you to go. Shall we? Sure. I would go. How far are we going? The devil smiled. He said, funnily enough, it's easier to get to hell than everybody imagines. It's right around the corner. Everybody who says, calories don't count, I just fibbed on my taxes a little bit. It's just right around the corner. And they started to walk out, and John went, well, if it's any kind of a distance, don't you think we should pack some food? And the devil went, really? He says, wait, it just so happens that I have the best apples in all the world in my garden right there. And the devil went, really? Don't con a con man. I'm an expert on apples. Well, you could judge for yourself. The devil said, fine. They walked outside, and there was that apple tree. He looked up at those apples, and sure enough, they were some delicious looking apples. And sparks flew from his fingertips, and he smiled, and he said, I think I'll just fly up and grab one. The devil flew up into the apple tree, and he started to grab that beautiful apple and pull it to his mouth, when John smiled, and he said, apple tree, grab him. And the apple tree grabbed the devil, and the devil went, what is this? And flames flew around him, thunder and lightning. The ground shook. He says, apple tree, beat the devil. And the apple tree went, shh, 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 and started to beat the devil. Now, I have to tell you, the devil is powerful, but Gabriel is an archangel, and his magic is powerful. And sure enough, the devil did fall into that trap. And so that apple tree started to beat the devil something awful. Oh, the noise, the caterwauling, the blugamifications, the noise that flew out of that devil's mouth. Oh, my goodness. You could hear it for counties around. People couldn't make out what that caterwauling was, but it sounded awful. And this went on and on. John walked back and went on about his business. He's still kind of ghostly form, so he just kind of relaxed. But after a while, well, morning came, and he walked back out, and there was the devil in the tree, and the devil was all torn. His clothes, his nice suit, were torn to shreds. His hooves were no longer buffed. His horns were no longer shiny. And he looked and he said, "John, yeah, you are a very clever fellow. I will make you a promise. You free me from this tree, and I never want to see you again. I'll let you go." And John said, "No more demons?" "No more demons, John." "Fine. Tree, let him go." The devil jumped down, snapped his fingers, and he repaired himself, and he looked and he said, "I have to say, John, I don't get tricked by many people, but I remember the ones who do very well." Well, the devil went, "Ta-ta," and disappeared. And John went, "Well, enough of that." And then he walked back into the kitchen and saw his body lying there and went, "Oh, wait a second. I forgot something." He was now a ghost. He wandered around the village and everything, and time seemed to spin past, and he didn't know quite what to do with himself. He just kind of felt cold and alone. And he looked over there, and what does he see? He sees one of the old ladies who had led a good life pass away, and all of a sudden, whoosh, there was a beam of light from the heavens, a little escalator going up, and that old woman was on that escalator, heading up. And so John ran over there, and he climbed onto that escalator and he went up to heaven. And he was standing in the line. Now, I don't know if you know this, but if you die in a stupid way, there are actually two lines. There's the normal line, and then there's the clown shoes line. So, if you die in some really stupid way, like trying to fix a light with a potato while standing on a skateboard, you stand in the clown nose line. So just so you know. Anyway, so John got in line, and finally he got to the front of the line. Who should be there at the gates but Gabriel? And Gabriel looks, and he's doing his paperwork. Name, he says, John Smith. Hard John, is that you? Yes. Let's see how you're doing. He pulled out the old karma meter. There wasn't a point on it low enough for John. He said, "Oh, I tried to tell you, you had a chance to do good. You had 3 powerful angelic wishes, and you used them to be mean. There's no way you're getting in here. I suggest you find an alternative. Why don't you see that escalator going down? You go on over there and head over there." John looked at him and said, So John went over and he got on that escalator going down. It played the girl from Ipanema all the way down. He got all the way down to the bottom rung of the 7th level of hell, and there was a great big iron gate, smoking red hot. Another drop won't hurt you. Calories don't count. Everybody cheats on their taxes. All over the door. At which point he walked up to that door. It was a bleak field all around, and he went, ding, 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 and knocked on the door, that big red smoking hot door, and the little trap door opened up, and a little demon nose pointed out and looked and went, and he heard, ding, 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 ding. A big eye looked out and went, ding, 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 ding. At which point the door opened up, and there was the devil. And the devil was wearing a lounge coat and holding the New York Times and a coffee cup. And he looked and he went, "John, what are you doing here?" Well, it's really cold out here in purgatory, and I kind of figured it's better to be warm than cold. John, I told you, I never wanted to see you again. You are not coming in here. Oh, no. But I'm mean and evil and nasty. He says, that you are. So much so, out of courtesy and professional respect, I'm going to allow you to go and do your own thing. But it's cold out there. Never say that the devil never did not do you a favor. And with that, the devil kicked out a red hot cinder, which rolled out. And then he closed the door. Goodbye, John. John looked at that red hot cinder and he tried to pick it up with his ghost hands, but that didn't work very well. There are very few things that grow in purgatory, but guess what? Pumpkins are one of those things. You know, because those vines go everywhere, right? And so John reached over and he found a half-rotting pumpkin and he managed to kick it into the pumpkin, and then he poked some eyes into the rotting pumpkin so that he could get a little light out of it, a little warmth. And then he made his way back here. In Ireland, they would see him. They would see this ghostly form glowing and following. And his name, of course, as you know, is Hard John, but another way to say Hard John is Jack. And when they saw that glowing pumpkin, they said, it's a lantern. And they started calling him Jack of the Lanterns. And guess what? When people came to the United States, the Irish brought that tradition with them. And they started using pumpkins and putting them outside. And little children on Halloween night, Halloween, they'll be walking down the paths and trick-or-treating and giggling and squealing. Every so often, you might see a pumpkin following them, glowing. Don't let him in. He's not a nice guy. And that's the story of Jack of the Lanterns and of a billion-dollar pumpkin industry. Well, thus concludes the two stories. Did you have any questions?
Those were fabulous. That was wonderful.
Yep, Jack of the Lanterns, absolutely. And it's funny because I will go to pumpkin patches and I will talk to the people who own the pumpkin patches. None of them know the story, which I find just fascinating. How can you not know this, the key story about your entire industry?
Obviously, Big Pumpkin might need a new lobbyist.
Yes, Big Pumpkin, yes. Well, Hard John, you know, who knows? Maybe now he's got labor representation or something like that. You know, I hear he's doing some work with Charlie Brown, so you know, maybe he's syndicated now. Who knows?
Nice cross promotion, that.
There you go. And by the way, all these books and stories and everything, I just want to throw this out there. When I was a kid, I had a rough childhood, foster homes, group homes, and so on and so forth. And I was a weird little kid, ADHD and all that other stuff. And with all the horror and bad things that were going in my life, there were a couple of teachers and certainly the librarians who stepped up for me. And so I learned to read to hide myself from the world, and I learned to love libraries. I learned to love books, which is why my house is full of them. And so every librarian and teacher who, you know, helps a kid indulge himself in folklore and folk tales and everything, thank you so much.
We're always happy to have you.
You know, it was a funny thing at the Sauk Rapids elementary school I was at. The way that it worked is if you were caught in the hallway without a bathroom pass, they would, you know, drag you off. But they never ever bothered the kid who was quietly reading in the library. And I found the DLR books of those beautiful DLR books of Norse mythology and Greek mythology. And, you know, that was the comic books of the ancient days. And I fell in love. And I have to tell you, that inspired me for the rest of my life. So bless you.
Thank you. True Thomas the Storyteller, we thank you so much for being at Stories at 7. Please come back in 2 weeks when we'll be hearing Emmy Award-winning Jim May. That will,
Ooh.
I know, that will be 7 p.m. on Friday, July 24th. Hope to see you then. And with that, we thank you for coming, Bandon, Helen. I don't know if it's the whole town. I'm thinking of counting it as the whole town for my counts. We'll see. Why not? They all crowd in.
And if you have any questions about the stories, you can find me at True Thomas, or True Thomas the Storyteller on Facebook, or truethomas.com. And I'm always glad to point people in the right directions if anybody's interested in learning storytelling. And by the way, if you are interested in storytelling, that lovely lady right there with the beautiful hair, she is a fantastic storyteller as well, and a wonderful resource. And believe me, there is nothing in this world that can't benefit from a little vitamin S. And by S, I mean story. So talk to her. She can hook you up.
It's true. Thank you, True. See you soon. Take care, and good night to everyone.
Good
Ho, ho,
night.
ho.